Canada remains one of the safest places in the world.
Canada's Liberal government just told Canadians that Canada is one of the safest countries in the world, but there's one chart that completely contradicts this that I'm going to show you and that they probably wish you never saw. And once you see it, you'll understand why so many Canadians feel like they're being gaslit. Because this story is not just about crime, it's about the entire direction of the country. I'm Elie Cantin-Nantel. Welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started, be sure you're subscribed. Up to 80% of my viewers are not subscribed, and I'm trying to get to 25,000 subscribers. Like and hype the video, hit the notification bell, and consider getting a paid channel membership for less than $5 a month, as I proudly take zero funding from the federal government, and I never will.
Journalism and commentary 1 year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
Rebuild the foundation. You have to retell the stories.
Market conservative
Other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. You think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged with. So yesterday, Canada's Public Safety Minister, Gary Anangasangari, held a press conference where he made the following claim, a claim that Canada remains one of the safest countries in the world. Watch.
Canada remains one of the safest places in the world, and we saw that last week from StatsCan that serious crime has declined for a second year in a row. That is really good news. But we also know that crime persists and must be fought with every tool we have. That is especially the case for gun and gang violence. Good policing is critical to dealing with guns and gangs, but it takes a lot more. We have to reach young people before they ever think about taking the wrong turn. And that means funding programs that are rooted in our communities, by our communities. That is exactly why I'm here today. I'm proud to announce a federal investment of up to $1.04 million to support gun and gang violence prevention right here in New Westminster.
So Gary Anangasangari claims that Canada is one of the safest countries in the world as he announces new money to combat crime. Well, if Canada was such a safe country, you probably wouldn't need to spend money to combat crime. And that's because Canada, unfortunately, after a decade of the Liberals, is not as safe as it once was. And that's not just my opinion. We have some data to back this up that we're going to walk through today, including one pretty shocking chart that you need to see. Let's start with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. It's a reputed think tank. And here's what they say. Violent crime has surged nationwide. Reading from the report, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute published the second volume of its Urban Violent Crime Report. We use Statistics Canada data from 20 of Canada's largest census metropolitan areas, representing nearly 2/3 of Canada's population, to explore changes in homicide, sexual assault, aggravated assault, and robbery, as well as the overall violent crime rate and violent crime severity index. The results are bleak. Using 3-year rolling averages, we show that urban violent crime has increased in nearly every major urban area, and that the problem is no longer confined to the country's largest centers. Over the last decade, the violent crime rate and sexual assault rate has increased in all 20 census metropolitan areas we studied. For violent crime severity, an index that tracks more serious violent crimes, 19 of the 20 areas also had increases over the last 5 years and over the last decade. And furthermore, they say the evidence should put an end to any lingering narrative that violent crime is improving. Canadians have too often been gaslit by politicians, advocacy groups, and media reports, repeating the similar refrain that crime rates have declined since a peak in 1992. It is a cold comfort to tell Canadians that life was more dangerous before 40% of them were born. The data from the last decade show Canadians are right to be increasingly concerned about the level of violent crime in their communities. The Macdonald-Laurier Institute are not the only ones who have observed an increase in crime in Canada. Here is a study from last year from the Fraser Institute, another very, very reputed think tank. It's got a reputation all over the world for the work that it does, and it's based here in Canada. Check this out. Toronto and Vancouver now have higher rates of property crime than New York and Elie, two cities that are considered, at least some parts of these cities are considered to be dangerous. But no, Toronto and Vancouver have more property crime. From this study, here's property crime per 100,000 people. You'll see here that Thunder Bay, London, Ontario, and Windsor, Ontario have higher rates of property crime than Detroit, a city that has a reputation for being dangerous. But oh no, in fact, Toronto has higher property crime than Detroit. On the West Coast, it's a similar story. As you see here, Kelowna, which is meant to be a beautiful, heavenly place to retire, while there's more property crime per 100,000 people than in Seattle, Portland, and Los Angeles, all cities governed by some of the most soft on crime, far left individuals on the planet. Vancouver also has more property crime than LA. When you look at violent crime, it doesn't get much better. Here is another graph from the Fraser Institute. You see here that Winnipeg, Manitoba, Regina, Saskatchewan, and Saskatoon, Saskatchewan all have higher crime rates than many US cities in these same geographic areas, including Minneapolis. This was, of course, the home of the violent George Floyd riots in 2020. And in Atlantic Canada, a place that has long had a reputation for being quiet, a place where you could leave your doors unlocked, well, it's not that pretty anymore. As you see here, St. John's, Moncton, Halifax, all high numbers of violent crime per 100,000 people. And Halifax has more violent crime than Boston. And here's the graph that is the most shocking of them all, and that if I were the Liberals, I wouldn't want Canadians to see. Since 2014, the rate of violent crime has increased in Canada, and by 2022 was 14% higher than the US. So this is Canada, and this is the US. Incredible stuff. And property crime, since 2014, property crimes have increased in Canada, and by 2022 was 27.5% higher than the US. Again, US used to have more. Now, Canada is over the US by 2022, according to the Fraser Institute, an internationally recognized think tank. This is not made up data. This is amongst the best researchers in the world, and that's what they concluded. Now, let's have a quick look at this article from the Hub, because there are some statistics in there that are worth seeing. Statistics Canada data shows sharp increases across multiple crime categories since 2015, including a 50% rise in overall violent crime, a 116% increase in violent firearm offenses, and a 357% spike in extortions. So all of this would suggest that there is a crime problem in Canada. So much so that the government's own data at Statistics Canada says so. That said, you will see many articles in the media talking about crime being down, and there's a lot lately. And that's one of the things that Gary and Angus Sangri was referring to. And I'll show them to you, because on this show, we always show the two sides, and I'll explain to you why you should take those reports with a grain of salt. So here's the first of such article from Global News. Canada's homicide rate sees biggest decline since 1986. And in the article, they say that police reported 672 homicides in 2025, 125 fewer than the year prior, down 16% in comparison to 2024. Among the 2025 homicide victims, 175 women and girls were killed, 67 fewer than 2024, while the number of men and boys decreased by 53, equaling 494 victims. The agency also reports that white men and boys accounted for the majority of homicide victims, and that women were disproportionately killed by their spouses or intimate partners. That said, separate data from Statistics Canada released on July 8th said the average rate of firearm-related intimate partner violence was 31% higher from 2020 to 2024 than from 2015 to 2019, and 58% higher than 2010 to 2014. The Canadian press, meanwhile, is putting into question new crime bills that the government has introduced, citing this reported decrease in crime. And here's where I say, take all of this with a grain of salt. It might be down from a year or two ago, but how does it compare to 10 years ago? 2 years ago, it was also very bad. 3 years ago, it was also very bad. So if it's very bad, just a little less bad than a few years ago, but still much higher than it was 10 years ago, it's still a problem. Second, there's something called reported crime. Reported crime and actual crime are two different things. A crime can happen, but it's only recorded if it is reported, if it's put into data. And what has happened over the last 5 years, especially, is there's so much crime happening again and again. You have people that are released onto the streets because of catch and release policies that were introduced by the Liberal government. that you have people that just don't bother reporting crimes anymore because they've lost faith in the institutions. So if people have lost faith in the institutions and they stop reporting crime, well, there's going to be reports that crime is down, even if the situation underground feels different. The claim that all crimes are down in Canada is also not accurate. For example, where I live in Ottawa, Ottawa police reporting increase in theft under $5,000, shoplifting charges this year. And here's a map of all the thefts under $5,000 that have taken place in just Ottawa this year. Look at this. Does this look like a country that has a crime situation under control? There's so many, like they're all on top of each other. And there have been several very concerning incidents that have taken place in Canada recently. For example, a fatal shooting during a street festival in Toronto, an exchange in gunfire near Toronto's waterfront, leading several people to be injured. And check out this story. Man faces charges after driving through busy playground splash pad in Ajax. And we continue to have a justice system that doesn't treat crime like a serious problem. For example, check out this recent story. Former Walmart worker who stole over $7,000 worth of goods given house arrest, partially due to, quote, risk of deportation, because we don't want to deport these criminals. We want them in our country. We want them to become Canadian citizens. What a freaking joke this country has become after a decade of the Liberals. And this is why I say that this is gaslighting. It is gaslighting. At the end of the day, there is a crime problem in Canada. So much so that the Carney Liberals introduced bail reforms to address the problems of the Trudeau-era bail reforms. If there wasn't a problem with crime in Canada, they wouldn't be introducing this legislation. They wouldn't be making funding announcements related to crime. They would be saying there's no problem. Yet they are. So by telling Canadians that everything is fine, it's actually very irresponsible. And to me, it shows that they're not actually taking the issue seriously. They're going to take cosmetic measures. They're going to make little changes here or there. But what Canada really needs is we need to throw the whole books at the criminals. That is the only way we will stop crime. That is how New York stopped crime under Giuliani. That is how countries in the Middle East and Asia have zero crime because they're very, very tough on crime. They don't give people light sentences to not want them to be deported. Oh, no. They take it very seriously. And Canada needs to do the same. And that's also why I implore the conservatives, make this one of your biggest issues. Canadians don't care about the industrial carbon tax, but they do care about the fact that their country has become more dangerous, unsafe. A lot of people tell me they don't recognize this country anymore. When I go to the US, I feel a lot safer than I do in Canada. I feel safer when I travel really anywhere outside of Canada. This has to change. Canada didn't used to be this way, and it must be made safe again. Anyways, this sums up today's video. I want to know what you think, so put your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like and hype the video, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and consider getting a paid channel membership. And until next time, God bless.